Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Many Faces of Cancer podcast. I am your host, Melissa Grosboll, and joining me today is Shena White. Shena is an award-winning contractor, scaling, and profitability specialist. She's a speaker and a wealth and efficiency expert. And she is also, and we're going to talk all about today, she is a breast cancer pre-vivor. So welcome to the show, Shena.
Thanks for having me.
I am so glad to finally get you on. We have been going back and forth about doing this for a few months, and sometimes it takes an assistant to actually get it all done.
Why I have one, because she keeps track of my life. So.
We all need one of those. Just keep track of our lives.
Yes. And
all right, so Shena, you live in Parker,
I actually live in Littleton now. I moved.
Okay, all right, but still a suburb of Denver.
Yes.
All right, and also congratulations. You will be getting married in March of next year, so congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, wedding planning is fun times.
I'm sure it is. You know, I got married over 30 years ago, and I was able to do it all myself. I don't think that's even possible anymore.
No, not at all.
Yes. And before the internet, so there was no, looking things up. I had a wedding book that had a bunch of people's names in it, and I just okay, this one sounds good, and that was how I did it.
You're like AAA flowers, yay!
Yeah. Yes, my first chiropractic practice in the late 90s was called Affinity Family Chiropractic because I wanted an A name, so I would be at the top of the yellow pages.
Yep.
Which, if anybody under 30 is listening to this, they have no idea what I'm talking about.
Right? We're like, we have just become old.
Yeah. Well, maybe you, not me.
I don't know. I'm turning 40 next month, so I'm super feeling old today.
You turn 40 next month? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I just turned 55, so I don't want to hear it.
You're like, shut it. No. Yeah. Okay. So yeah.
All right. So take us back. I wanna hear a little bit about your backstory and what led you to get genetic testing in the first place.
Yeah. So breast cancer has kind of been a part of my life for my whole life. My grandmother was a 2-time survivor. My great grandmother actually passed her second go around with breast cancer. And so it's kind of just always there, like a thought. And then my mom was diagnosed the first time, I think 2009, 2008 or 2009, somewhere around there. Because I remember I was in college, and so I actually commuted 2.5 hours each direction to college in order to kind of be home for my mom and be closer to her to help out. Yeah, it's fun times. The commuting thing was really not that fabulous. But, and then I actually had a cervical cancer scare right around that same time. And so it was just like, like, what the heck? My female parts are trying to kill me. And so we kind of thought
everything. You were very young at the time too. Like, if it was 15 years ago.
I was 24. And so I had to go through like a whole bunch of treatments and everything. And so me and my mom were doing treatments at the same time. And so right before I was graduating college, it was like right around 2009, 2010, we thought we were finished. And so we both we went to Disneyland together and we were like, yay, we're done with cancer stuff. But then my mom had a second time around in the interim. But then in 2018, I found a lump in my breast. And I went to the doctor, right? Because that's what you do. And they were kind of ambivalent about it, honestly. Even with my history and everything, they just didn't really seem to care. But they did, yeah, right? See that? And it was like, I don't know, hello, you can feel this with your hand. Like, I'm not crazy, And so then they sent me for a mammogram and for an ultrasound. And the radiologist came in and he literally acted like I was crazy. He's like, we can't see anything on any imaging. And I'm like, okay, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And
Like,
he's
feel
like,
my
well,
breast. It's right here.
yeah.
I can tell you
I'm like,
exactly where it
yeah.
is.
I said that to him. I was like, you want to give me your hand? And you can. And he's like, no. He's like, but we can't see it. And so I'm like, okay, cool. Thanks. So then I went back to my primary care, and he was like, well, in order to go further, you have to have like, basically you have to show like changes or to see it on imaging. And somehow the original specialist had written down the wrong boob. So it was in my right breast, but she had written down it was in my left. So then they were like, oh no, now because it's in your right. I'm like, it did not move. She's just dumb. Like, that was an error. It's I'm like talking to the same guy I talked to originally who sent me to the specialist. I'm like, you remember. And he's like, well, our policies. I'm like, I don't care about your policies. This is here. And of course, knowing my grandmother's history, my mother's history, I'm like freaking out. And I had two young kids. I was self-employed, like freaking out. And I'm like, dude, this is for real. So he was like, you know what? I'm just going to push it through and get you the surgical consult. And so he did. And so I went to the surgical consult, and the guy was like, yeah, we can't see it on imaging. He's like, because you have really dense breasts. He's like, so we couldn't, like, where it was like right in the middle, right underneath my nipple. He's like, there's no way we would ever be able to see that on imaging. And because it's right underneath the nipple, you couldn't see it with the ultrasound either. He's like, but I can feel it. So I know it's there. It's like, and I don't like your history. He's like, I can't do a needle biopsy because I can't see it on imaging. He's like, I have to do a lumpectomy. He's like,
would an MRI have shown it?
I don't know. He was just, surgeons, they like to cut. He was like, lumpectomy, let's do it. And I was like, okay, let's do it. So I had
Yay.
yeah, yay, surgery. But I had a lumpectomy, and they found out it wasn't cancer, but it was called adenosine sclerosis. It was kind of a precancerous condition. And he was like, yeah, just be aware. You'll probably get more of these lumps. Like 3 months after that, we found out my mom had breast cancer for the third time. And I was just like, you know what? I'm done with these boobs. They need to go away. They need to exit my body and be vominosed. Because I was done having children, and so I'm like, I'm not breastfeeding anymore. Like, just get rid of them. So I did a lot of research, because the one thing nice about being self-employed is you get to choose whatever insurance you want. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of research, and I found out that one of the Cigna would cover preventative treatment. So I specifically chose that. I got a new primary care provider, and I went to him, and I was like, he's like, why are you here? I'm like, because I want to get my breasts cut off. He's like, what?
Now, did you have the genetic testing or not?
Not at that point. Not yet.
Okay.
So, because my other doctors, they didn't, it took them 6 months to actually freaking get rid of a lump you could feel with your hands. Like,
okay, gotcha.
They were terrible. So I went to this new guy, and I just straight up told him, and he's like, okay, here's how we start the process. And that's when I had the genetic testing done.
Okay.
Because I had to get the referral and insurance, man. Hoops.
So they wouldn't take them off until you had the genetic test.
Yeah. Well, because they would, but they wouldn't pay for it. And then you have to, it's crazy. Well, yeah, and it was crazy too, because I had to go in for genetic counseling before they would actually give me the genetic test.
And what does genetic counseling entail?
So with that, it was basically, I had to go see a therapist lady, like a social worker, who was a genetic specialist. And because my mother had never been tested, they were like, well, basically in getting tested, if we find out you have BRCA, it in essence then diagnoses your mother. Like, there's a lot of stuff there. I'm like, dude, my mom's already going through cancer. They're like, oh, there's family issues, and basically you just have to like be aware of all the things that could happen. Now, this might be different now, I don't know, but they made me jump through a lot of hoops before they would even test me. Like, are you ready mentally to handle what could happen? I'm like, yeah, I've like been dealing with this for years. Like, whoopity freaking do. But they made me do all that. So then I got the test, and I have a genetic defect of unknown origin.
What does that mean?
Means so basically like BRCA, before they knew it was BRCA, it was just like they knew something was wrong, but they didn't know what.
Okay.
So then I had to sign some papers to let them take my genetic material for research, because basically like we know your genes are jacked, but it's not like a known jackedness. So we can use this to then figure out stuff later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at some point they will find that it is not a new BRCA, but probably
It'll
something
have,
that
yeah, there's like actually like 15 different known genes. BRCA is the most famous one, but there's a whole bunch.
okay. It's good to
Um,
know. I mean,
yeah.
doesn't genetic testing test for like 87 different things now or something like that? It's crazy, everything that it tests for.
Well, yeah, and they were saying too that, because I was like, oh, well, what if you've been tested? They said at the time, so this is still like 2018 and 19, they were like, oh, even if you tested 5 years ago, we know so much more now.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, but they were like,
Sometimes
we don't
I
know what's wrong with
wonder
you.
if Sometimes I wonder if, and this is just my alternative healthcare background, that they're just going to keep finding more things to test for. And then you're eventually going to get to the point where everybody has something. Because if you're testing all trillion genes, there's going to be one that's defective in everybody. And is that going to end up causing more problems than it's solving? I don't know, maybe not, but it's just interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely they'll find something wrong with everyone. And I think it's kind of, I mean, and that's I think why they wanted the genetic counseling beforehand, because they want you to be really in the vibe with it. Because like for instance, so this was a long, long, long time ago, but my I got married when I was 19, and the person I was married to, he had Huntington's disease in his family, and that's pretty like for real. And so he got genetic testing done, and we had to go through, I mean, a lot, because his mother refused to get tested.
Mm,
So we had to go through a lot of counseling, because if he had and he had some symptoms, so that's why we were getting tested, because they were like, if you have this gene, then 100% your mother does too, and she's refusing, so that means you will in essence diagnose her. Because so it's kind of the same thing with my mom, but like way to the next level. So I mean, there is a reason, and some genetic tests totally make sense. Like Huntington's disease is really, really awful, and he
yeah.
turned out to not have the gene, so no idea if his mom does or not. But he had other issues that were causing those symptoms. But point
And
being,
that's a
genetic
totally
testing,
different story there.
yeah, like we would go down that rabbit hole. But point is that genetic testing is awesome, but there is a reason they make you kind of be really, decided beforehand.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because I go back and forth about getting tested. I mean, I don't have any history of cancer in my family, but
Mm-hmm.
because I have had cancer, they're recommending. And then if something comes up for me, then they'll recommend and pay for my daughter to be tested. But they don't think that there would be anything just because I have no history of it. Whereas it was your great grandmother, your grandmother, your mother, like that's a pattern.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and even my daughter sometimes she's like, "Mommy, am I gonna have to get my boobs taken off?" And I'm like, "Or am I gonna get cancer?" And I'm like, that's a question I don't have an answer to. And I'm like, you know what, baby, by the time you're older, I'm like, they're making strides with cancer treatments every single day. I'm like, hopefully this won't even be an issue for you. Like that's the way I want to see it. But I'm like, but for me, I knew I needed to be here for you guys, and I knew the support system I had at the time was not great, and so I knew that cancer would be literally not doable. And then I knew already at that point that I was going to eventually be a single mom, and so I needed to take care of things then so that I could be there for my kids once I made the plunge into single motherhood.
And how old is your daughter now?
She is 9.
Oh, man, those are, as a mom, those just must be really hard conversations to have your young child have to think about these things,
Hmm.
at that age. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think it's so in her mind now because my mom actually has been diagnosed a fourth time and has stage 4 breast cancer now. Um,
God, that sucks.
so yeah, it's totally lame. But so like they see grandma, and grandma has no hair and grandma has a port and grandma, and then my fiance, his mother died of breast cancer, um, about a little over a year after we were together. So, they already saw Grammy die and they were there, at the end. I was very, very involved in her care. And because I have my kids 85% of the time, 85% of the time, they were very involved in her care. And so, they saw all that. And now they see my mom, kind of unfortunately starting down that same path. And so it's something that's just in our lives.
Gotcha. So it sounds like this was a pretty no-brainer decision for you to make.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, I was like, but it was funny though how many people were really against it.
Like friends, family, doctors.
All of the above.
Okay.
So my primary care physician was totally down. He was 100% like from the get. He didn't know me, and I like he because at first because I told him, hey, I wanted to cut my boobs off, and he was like, what? And then I told him, he was like, oh man, okay, yeah, I would want to cut my boobs off too. He was like, let's do this. He's like, bye to the boobs. But the first breast doctor I went to was extremely against it. Like she was like almost like violently opposed. And she's like, I think this is the worst decision you could ever make for your life. I'm like, literally, I'm like, dude, not your life, man. I'm like, if you want to say you're not the surgeon for me, that's cool, but you don't have to be so mean. Bye. So I did
Yeah,
not.
definitely not the surgeon for you.
Yeah, no, we did not go forward with that.
That's why there are many doctors out there, and second and even third opinions are vital.
Yes, get multiple opinions. So then
Absolutely.
I found a reconstructive surgeon who I love. So I got my reconstruction from Dr. Michael Bateman. He's amazing. He's an amazing human, an amazing doctor. His whole staff is amazing. Cannot say enough great things about Dr. Bateman and his office. And he referred me to a different breast surgeon, Dr. Jody Widener, and she was
Oh, she was my surgeon too.
okay. I was like, she was
Yes.
beyond amazing. I can't say
Yes.
anything but amazingly good things about her and him and the whole team. Um, they were just phenomenal. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So, I mean, you went through genetic counseling before you
Mm-hmm.
even had the genetic testing.
Yep.
Was there, like, tell me a little bit about, like, just, I know the decision was easy for you, but still, like, making that decision to lose your breasts, like, there must have been something to that versus just like, I want them gone. I mean, can you share a little bit about, like, there's one thing of like, yeah, I want them gone, but then there's like, okay, let's do it, and they're kind of almost like two different decisions sometimes.
Yeah, I think that I had always kind of had the niggling in the back of my mind that just felt inevitable.
Okay.
And so then I just wanted to kind of have my own power back in the situation, and then that was my way of kind of like taking the control back and saying, you know what, I'm gonna make the decision. Because it was great because I got to choose who my reconstructive surgeon was. I got to take the time to interview breast surgeons and find the one that was right for me, to interview reconstructive surgeons and find the one that was right for me. If I had cancer, time is not your friend, right? So you got to do things quick. I got to take months to figure it out and say, okay, this is who I want. This is the date we're going to do. This works in my calendar. This works in my schedule. I got to plan ahead. So my parents came for a month. My ex's mom came for a month because I couldn't drive for 6 weeks. So, I needed help with the children and with this. And so, I got to really have control over all of that. And I think that's why I decided to do it the way I did it, because I didn't want to have to be reactive. I got to be very proactive about my choices.
Gotcha. That's very powerful. I mean, because most of us, when cancer hits, it's like, all right, you got to do things quick, and
Yeah.
and I mean, I've talked to people and I've talked to professionals, and most of them have said, at least not the people a little more alternative, have said that, unless you have, infectious carcinoma or like, a couple of things, you still do have time. I think a lot of hospitals just try and get you in the system as quick as possible, so
Yeah.
you don't take the time to second guess yourself. But really being able to be proactive instead of like, oh my gosh, I've got to do something quick. That's so powerful. And to be in control of your destiny versus, cancer controlling what you do. I love
Yeah.
that.
Well, and then also I was able to do a nipple sparing direct to implant surgery. So I just had one surgery. I had a second one for a fat transfer to make them look a little more natural, which I honestly would not do again. But the first surgery, I went to bed, I went to sleep with my old boobs, and I woke up with my new ones.
Wow. So no need for the expanders or any of that kind of thing?
No, because they didn't have. So so we had attempted to do direct to implant, and there's a lot of stuff that has to go into that.
Okay.
A lot of it's size. So strangely, you can't have too small and you can't have too big. So it's very Goldilocksy here.
A perfect B2C cup, right?
So I'm a D, but you also have to have enough like extra skin. So they were a little flabby from breastfeeding, so I got to go to my breastfeeding size boobs because they had to fill up those balloons, so to speak. And then they do the mastectomy part, and then they actually take it to straight to the lab, and while you're under, they double check that there's no active disease.
Okay.
And if they find any active disease, then you go to expanders.
Gotcha.
And then they place the implants, and they use this scanner thing to make sure the blood flow is right. And if there's any even inkling that the blood flow is not just perfect, you wake up with expanders.
Gotcha. So you have Goldilocks conditions.
I did. I know. So I went under not knowing how I was going to wake up, honestly. And I had to be okay with that. Which I would say that was probably the freakiest thing, is literally saying, okay, I might wake up with my new boobs, and I might wake up with expanders and have to go through all that. And I might wake up knowing that I have cancer. I don't know. So that was probably the weirdest part of it. But then now, like I don't have feeling, right? So they cut the nerve. I run into shit all the time. And I'm like, I'm like, oh yeah, I can't feel. So you have to be really careful. And then they're just not your boobs. So it's definitely a total like mind bending experience.
Okay.
Because it's you, but it's not you. And it like feels like I'm like, still to this day, it's been years, but it feels like I'm like laying on grapefruits. Which is not really like, imagine.
All right, that's a good visual there.
It's not very comfortable, right? So like I used to be a stomach sleeper. No more. It's very
well, from a chiropractic perspective, stomach sleeping is not good for you anyway. So
you're like, so that's good. We're glad we got rid of that.
Stops you from sleeping on your stomach. All right, we're all good.
Well, yay, then. I don't sleep on my stomach at all anymore. It's super. I don't like being on my stomach at all anymore. It's like so uncomfortable.
Now, did you have was it just the double mastectomy? I know some people when they have the BRCA gene, then they
Mhm.
do the oophorectomy and get rid of all possibility of any gynecologic cancers. Did you feel the need to do that as well, or was it just the mastectomies?
So the only history is breast cancer in my family.
Okay.
And so I have not felt the need to do any of those other things.
Okay, good.
Though I do I do have a history of cervical precancer. So I have my fun times yearly. um, so I mean, who knows what the future holds there, but
Right.
that's the one that I just keep, you know, doing the normal double checking every year
Okay,
and
awesome. All
screening.
right.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that was the best decision for you, and everything is hunky dory, and you don't really even have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, so I have to get MRIs yearly,
Okay.
to double check that, that they're, they didn't pop or anything. And then also, because there is still, they take about, it's somewhere between 80 and 90% of the breast tissue, but they can't take all of it because some of it's like way up in your armpit. And then I did
Mhm.
have nipple sparing, so there's that there too. So I still have to get, and I can't do mammograms. Um, so I have to get an MRI every single year.
Okay. Which is such a joy, laying face down and those things, and yeah, it's so comfortable.
So yeah, so my first MRI, oh my gosh, that's a story. So I go in and the guy says that that they were gonna do non-contrast and contrast. So they do the contrast halfway through. And he's like, oh yeah, he's like, once we shoot the contrast in, if you hit the button to pull to be done to pull out, we have to completely it's the whole thing didn't happen. He's like, so be ready. So don't hit that button.
Okay.
But what he didn't tell me was anything about how the contrast makes you feel.
Mm.
So I'm in there and it's, loud and annoying and totally nerve wracking. And then he's like, we're going to put the contrast in. I'm like, okay. And then it goes in and then I instantaneously feel like I'm literally on fire. Like I'm going to die. Like I can't breathe.
Wow.
And I'm freaking out. And then I'm having a panic attack, right? So originally I had been laying there with my eyes closed, but then I was afraid I was dying. So I'm like, I cannot close my eyes because as long as I'm staring at this, I know I'm alive.
Because you
Because
can't
I
move either.
can't move, and I don't want to push the button because then I have to start all over. So I'm like, okay, I can't. But I'm like, if I feel my eyes start to close, then I'll push the button, right? And then my face is sweating, so then I have a piece of sweat on the tip of my nose, which is itching. Okay, but I can't move, and I'm freaking out. And then so then finally that series is over, and he comes and he's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "No, I am not okay. I am not okay at all. I'm freaking out." And he's like, "Oh, you'll be fine." And he just leaves me. And I'm like, "What?" So I'm like, "Oh," he's like, "You only have 15 more minutes. You're good." And I'm like, I'm not good. I'm not good. What are you? Come back. So I'm stuck in there. So we finally get done. This other chick comes and she's like, "How was it?" I'm like, "It was awful." And I tell her all the things that happened. She's like, "Oh, that's the contrast." And I'm like, "The what?" She's like, "Yeah, the contrast." She's like, "It does that to everybody. It's hot flashes and this thing. It's totally normal." And I'm like, I legit thought I was dying here. You guys could have told me this beforehand so that I didn't think I was having an allergic reaction to this stuff that you shot in my veins and then had a panic attack. She's like, "Oh, I'm sorry that happened, but you're fine. You're good." Cool. Thanks, guys. You guys
Thanks for
are
that.
awesome. Thanks for the prep there, Envision Salad Job. Yeah, so their bedside manner was a little not that great, but I made it through and totally thought I was dying.
Okay. And now you have one every year. So do you have the same experience every year?
So I got to wait a few years. Now I have to have them every year. So I have one that I have to schedule, and last year was my first one. So, but now I'm
Okay.
prepped. I'm ready to go. I know what's going to happen, and I think they don't have to do contrast this year.
Oh, okay. So you know that you're going to feel like you're dying, but also that you'll end up okay.
Hopefully, yeah. I would prefer to not shoot contrast into my veins yearly because that stuff is not the best for your kidneys or your liver.
And I mean, and it is a heavy metal, and
That's what
there
I mean.
is, yeah, that goes along with that too, unfortunately. And they tell you that it has a pretty short half-life, but it actually doesn't. So I had some blood work, or I don't remember if it was blood or urine. I did both, and it showed that my galladinium, whatever it is,
Yeah.
was like off the charts. And this was like 6 months after my
Oof.
MRI.
That's
So
fun. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
so if I'm
don't.
doing it yearly, I'd prefer to not, just like have that. It's one of those like cost benefit things, and to
Right.
me, they specifically wanted it for the baseline, and I get that. But now it's like I'm maybe okay with it like every 3 to 5 years or something, but
Gotcha.
not every year. That seems overkill.
Okay. So I guess tell me like how life is today. Like, did you, I don't know, like how have you grown or changed, since this experience kind of, the whole point of the show is stories of
Mhm.
hope and inspiration, and really kind of seeing the silver linings of cancer or cancer scare or whatever. So kind of tell us how things are today.
Yeah, I mean things are good. Like as I said, I would do it again every day of the week. It was so stressful. Like I used to be like crazy pants about my monthly self checks, which I still do, right? Because it's not all I check my underarms and everything. But it was just so stressful, and it was always like in the back of my mind, like what happens. And then when I found the lump, it was just like, oh my god, oh my god, and it was almost like it felt, as I said, it felt inevitable. And now it's like it doesn't feel like that's necessarily an inevitability in my life anymore. And so I'm so happy I did what I did. And
Great.
I'm part of it's called the Force. It's all for pre-vivors and people who are BRCA and getting like preventative treatments. So a lot of hysterectomies, a lot of mastectomies, a lot of all of that, a lot of ovarectomies. Um, and so I'm really encouraging of other people and telling them my story, and and it's weird to buy clothes because normal boobs, they squish a lot, and so you can squish them into things, but the gummy bear implants do not squish the same, and so a lot of clothes just don't zip over those bad boys. Yeah, I mean, I
Gotcha.
like them. They're pretty, and Dr. Bateman did a very fine job. Uh, but but they do not squish.
Gotcha. All right. So definitely you feel less stressed, less worried about,
Mhm.
about that inevitability, and that's wonderful. And I love, like I said in the beginning, this is kind of new for me
Yeah.
because I just never experienced it before. And like this is just really great information for people. So my last question that I ask everybody is, what advice would you give to someone who may have, has a family history of cancer? They're wondering about genetic testing. Or they have the BRCA gene or one
Mhm.
of these other genes. Obviously you talked about like it was a no-brainer for you, and boom, it was done. But what advice would you give to somebody who is kind of experiencing this, holy crap, I've got this, like now what?
Yeah, I would say to really just make a decision for yourself, not for anyone else. Because I had friends and family and people who were really encouraging and really like, yeah, you should do this. But I had a lot that were the exact opposite. I had so many people. I talked about the one doctor, but I even had like friends. I had people where they're like, "That's crazy. I would never do that." I'm like, "Okay, cool. Then you don't ever do that." Last time I checked, this is my body, not yours. And so really deciding for yourself, because I mean, especially as women, but especially when you're like, I'm going to cut off my boobs and I technically do not have cancer, then like the people come out to pray, like just like pounce.
Right.
So you really have to be like set in the decision and it has to be 100% for you, not anyone else, because the recovery sucks. And there's still things like, because I have to massage them all the time and all these things. There's a lot of things that you don't have to do with normal boobs that you do with the replacements. I still have I have to focus on being back because naturally the whole reconstruction wants to pull me forward. So I have to really focus on going back. So there's a lot of stuff. I would still do it every day of the week, but because I was set and I made that decision for me, not for anyone else. So I'd say to anyone thinking about it, know that it's right for you, because no one gets to make that decision but you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And do your research. Make sure that you know all the things and you're making an informed decision versus a bunch of people telling you what they think you should do.
Yeah, no. It has to be about you because it's your body.
Right.
And if you've made that decision, then find the care, find the doctors, find the insurance company, find the way, because there are people out there who are going to support you and there are people who aren't, and so you just need to find those supporters and have them on your side.
Okay. And hopefully, you said that Cigna covers it. Hopefully more insurances are seeing that, especially if you have the gene, and they will cover that as a preventative thing.
Yeah, I mean, and you can look it up. A lot of them do, some of them don't. I had Kaiser before that, so the ones that took 6 months to pull out the lump and everything, that was Kaiser. They were like, no.
Okay, so not Kaiser. Hopefully there's something else you can qualify for.
Or you can, it was pretty expensive, but I don't know how much cash pay would have been. Yeah, the bills that they sent to my insurance company was $150,000, and I was in the hospital 6 hours.
Wow. Good Lord. I know. People wonder why we have a healthcare crisis in this country.
Well, part of it was they use this stuff called Alloderm, which is it's a collagen matrix. And so that's what they use to create the sling for the reconstruction. And one sheet of that stuff was $30,000 or something like that. It was crazy. Yeah.
Once again, that's a whole other conversation.
about why stuff costs what it does.
Right.
The insurance company or the hospital did not get paid $150,000. They got paid 15, but they charged that. And that's a whole tax conversation. But anyway,
gotcha. All right. Well, thank you so much, Shena, for joining me today. And this is such great information. It is, I'm so excited for people to hear this, and because I know a lot of people, out there are struggling with this type of decision. The more genetic testing becomes available. So I appreciate you kind of breaking everything down and finally being on with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm happy to share my story. And if anybody, has questions they want to ask me directly, I'm super easy to find on social media.
Yeah, that was the one thing I was going to ask. How can people find you? How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, so Shena, Shena White, or a lot of stuff is under my business handle, Your Pocket CFO. So yeah,
and we'll put all of that stuff in the show notes as well, so people can reach out to you if they need to.
Yeah, I love helping other people through their decision making process and just giving them my perspective and my story. But again, it's their decision.
Right. Just know as much as you can before you make the decision.
Yeah, 100.
All right. Well, good. Well, thank you again so much. I appreciate it. And have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Bye-bye.